This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. The book is The Boomerang. The author, Robert Bailey, Wall Street Journal best-selling author and attorney. Robert Bailey consistently delivers propulsive legal thrillers that have earned him a passionate and devoted following of readers worldwide and favorable comparisons to John Grisham. His 10 previous books have received wide critical acclaim for the tight pacing and twisty plots, as well as for their complex, layered characters who often grapple with ethical dilemmas. This 11th novel from Bailey, The Boomerang, somewhat of a departure for him. It's a political conspiracy thriller featuring a breakneck road trip from the White House to the dusty plains of rural New Mexico. Robert Bailey, Wall Street Journal bestselling author of the Jason Rich series, which includes Rich Justice, Rich Waters, and Rich Blood, the Bocephus Haynes series, which includes The Wrong Side and Legacy of Lies, and the award-winning McMurtrie and Drake legal thriller series, including The Final Reckoning, The Last Trial Between Black and White, and The Professor. He also wrote the inspirational novel, The Golfer's Carol, makes his home in Huntsville, Alabama. Happy to have for the first time Robert Bailey join me here on the Speaking of Writers podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
So tell us about Boomerang and what inspired it.
So the Boomerang's a deeply personal story for me. My dad and wife both battled lung cancer in 2016 and 17. My dad had terminal lung cancer, stage 4, and his prognosis was really bad. My wife Dixie had stage 3, early stage 3 lung cancer, which was really a shock. You know, she was a non-smoker in great health, and they were treated at the same time. My father died in March of 17. My wife had curative surgery in April of 17, and so I really had a front row seat for 2 battles of cancer that were people that I love very much, very close to me, and a lot of my writing has kind of stemmed from that since. I think the character of Tom McMurtrie in the McMurtrie books was influenced by my father's death. And then The Golfer's Carol, I probably would not have written without that journey. The Golfer's Carol is kind of an inspirational novel I wrote to mourn my father because I really didn't have time to do so when my wife was sick. And then the Boomerang is kind of side B to that cancer journey, where I just sort of put in all of the different things you hear in waiting rooms while you're waiting for news that is going to define the rest of your life. And people talk, and these are the things they talk about, this type of conspiracy. You know, is there a cure? And if there was a cure, would the government let us have it? And I think I thought it would be great fodder for fiction, and also a good way for me to get out some of my feelings about it. And at the heart of the story, though, it's about family, about what one family will do to save someone they love.
So healing for you, this book.
It was, yeah, definitely. I think writing is definitely therapeutic at times, and for me, getting involved in a story like that is an escape, but it's also can be some healing too. And writing has done that for me for a number of years.
Let's talk about these characters. Eli James, the chief of staff. How did you create Eli?
I wanted him to be sort of a classic, like politician, smart, savvy con man, you know, at his heart. I mean, which kind of glassed throughout the story. You know, Eli's kind of a con man, but I don't think the reader's going to like Eli the first time they meet him. But then Eli goes through something that I think every person who has a child or loves someone in their family can go through, which I think is the bonding moment for Eli with the reader. And so I thought it would be interesting to explore a character journey that starts in kind of a bad, selfish place for him, but ends in this, a much different place.
What about Nestor the Beast Sanchez? What's he like?
Nestor is sort of a classic, bad guy that gets to be the good guy in the story. You know, it's kind of a pro wrestling trope. I guess I'm a pro wrestling fan, but Nestor is sort of foreshadowed throughout the story as this really, awful man, ruthless man who, who just so happens to have this connection with Eli through his contributions to the president and also his relationship with Eli's wife. And so when Eli is at his worst, when they really need help, they know there's one person out there the government's kind of afraid of. And that's, I think, something that was fun to play off of in this story. And Nestor is probably one of my favorites in the story.
Mm. The president of the United States in this book, The Boomerang, has terminal cancer, and then Eli, just as the president's mysteriously cured, Eli gets heartbreaking news. His teenage daughter has cancer. New Mexico plays a role in this story. Your wife is from, and her family is from there.
Right.
And you've spent a lot of time there as well.
We did. I didn't realize I was doing book research, but over the course of 25 years of going to reunions, both family and high school with Dixie, I've gotten to know that area. And the way that, the Dixie's entire step family pretty much lives in that area. Her stepfather lives in Huntsville with us, but all of his family is from that region. And the way they took in Dixie kind of as one of theirs, and even me as an outsider, it really inspired a lot of the familial, aspects to this story. Some of the characters inspired by family members of hers. And it helps me when I can really feel a place to be able to use it as almost the setting kind of becomes a character in and of itself. And all these landmark places that we got to visit, like the Sandia Peak, become, part of the attraction in the story, I think.
Yeah, Eli is based on a family member, right?
So Eli is really not based on a family member. He is more of a fictional character. Some of his background is sort of close to me because he grew up in a little place called Hazel Green, which is where I grew up. It's a little suburb of Alabama, or of Huntsville. But his wife, Dale, in the story, Dale James, is sort of inspired by my wife. My wife's middle name is Dale. And then there are characters, sub characters in New Mexico, the brothers, Santi and Amos. The Uncle Ralph character, who's one of my favorites, is clearly inspired by Dixie's Uncle Ralph, who drove a Pepsi truck. And so it was fun to be able to put some of those elements in the story.
The title, without giving away too much, The Boomerang, where'd that come from?
So the original title of the story was The Medicine Box, and which I liked, and it was hard for me to move on to a different title. But as I was writing the book, the boomerang became the name for the medication, the miracle drug. Boomerang goes out and comes back, and it basically brings a person back to where they were before the cancer. That was sort of the the impetus for the name of the medication. And we just started thinking, that's also the name of the government cover-up, Project Boomerang, and it for lack of a better description, it sounded cooler. And so, and that does play into it. And so it just sort of organically became the title, but I really am proud of it. I like the way it sounds.
Robert, I want to talk to you about your writing process a little bit. First, you're an attorney. How did you become a writer?
A long process for me. I took a creative writing class my last year of college, last semester. I had a free elective. I'd always loved to read fiction, wanted to try it. Wrote a few short stories. They were terrible, but I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I got enough good comments to think there might be something there. And when I went to law school, I had the idea for my first novel, The Professor. And, it kind of came to me in a smart aleck idea of what would happen if a law professor actually had to try a case. And it kind of stuck with me, what would happen. And then the story kind of came to me as a situation, what would happen if a professor came back to the courtroom after many years away? And what if he was a legend? And so those, I'm a situational writer, and that once I had the situation and the character in mind, it was kind of fun to branch out from there.
You're known for your tight pacing and the twisty plots too. How did you develop those skills?
Trial and error. So the first draft of The Professor was 800 pages long, and nobody would have read it. My mom read it, Dixie read it, but it was too long. And I think the biggest thing I learned in the trial and error of writing those first few drafts of The Professor, and even into my second book, I had to shelve The Professor for a while and start writing book two. And I got all the way through with book two, and it was 600 pages, so still too long. but I was getting better, and I was starting to figure out that I love characterization. I love the Harry Bosch books. Michael Connolly does such a
Yeah.
good job in Los Angeles, and Harry's love of jazz music and the different types of beer he drinks. And I just love those details. And I wanted to be able to keep that, but I was spending too much time on it without the story moving. And so what worked for me is just creating movement in the story where these moments are introduced while a character is interviewing a witness or on the way to doing something important instead of just, brushing their teeth or sitting down in a chair.
Can you write anywhere, or you have a special place?
So my favorite place to write is at home. I've got a little small office at home that is kind of like, ground zero for my writing. But I do find that it doesn't have to be there. Sometimes, especially if I've got some blockage, it helps to go to a coffee shop, hear a little background noise. I have 3 kids. I've written at Little League baseball games. I've written at dance competitions. I've written when I've had deadlines or needed to get writing done. You write where you have to write, golf tournaments. But I do think sometimes some of the magic moments sometimes happen outside of the office, when I'm not really expecting them to happen. So
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of authors here on this podcast about needing a little bit of background noise, and the coffee shop is usually number one
yeah,
as outside places to write.
it can almost feel clinical sometimes when you write. It's very solitary,
Mm.
and there is some comfort, I think. I had a golf tournament last year for my son. I was there, and I had this perfect setup in a hotel room, and I just couldn't do it. I just
Mm.
froze up, and I went down to I guess the lounge area, I guess the outside bar area by the pool, and I read a little bit, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to try it again. And then like 3 hours later, I've got 2,500 words. I've teared up a little. I mean, it's really a magic moment, but it wasn't the way I drew it up. So
Are you an outliner or a pantser?
started out as a pantser, and it took way too long, to write the first story. And I still will take dirt roads along the way. But now what I do is I'll write sort of a loose synopsis. It's not an outline. I think an outline would tighten me up too much, but about a 4-page synopsis that generally tells the story of how I think it's going to go. And that does help when I'm having some blockage, or if I take a dirt road too long, it gets me back on track.
Robert, when you're writing an emotional scene, and I'm sure this book especially has emotional scenes for you and personal for you, how do you get in the mood?
Well, I think it's just no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. You really
Mm.
have to be in the flow of the story for those moments to happen. And for me, it's just getting out of my own way, really, and writing the scene. And usually those scenes will happen um, organically, where I'll write the beginning of it, with like some dialogue or set the scene up. And then once I feel it, it just pours out. And trying to not to, to just stay out of my way and let myself experience all those emotions, and is the best way, I think, to get that done. But I do feel like those are the moments that make it all worthwhile, and all of my stories have a bit of an inspirational component to them. I've always loved to read books that have a little bit of that to them, some type of theme, whether it's redemption or, something where you kind of want to root for the character. And so that happens a lot in the Boomerang. And it's definitely one of the more rewarding parts, I think, of writing.
If you had to say this book, The Boomerang, is about one thing, what would it be? Would it be redemption?
I think this book is about um, a question of, what would you do to save the people you love?
Mm.
Like, it's about family and love, and it's hard. It's a chase book about this family that discovers this miracle that's being hidden from the world, and they take it not to save the world, but to save their daughter. And it's very much a family thriller, and I think that's the key question. I do think along the way, Eli James does receive some redemption along the way. And I think some of the other characters do too, but I think they all sort of, at least within that group, bond together for that one singular purpose. And that was, to me, that was what kept me going in the story. It wasn't the conspiracy or all the politics, it was that question. And if I kept it about that, I felt like readers would keep reading.
You mentioned Michael Connelly earlier. What genres do you enjoy reading?
I really love to read a pretty wide, group. I love thrillers. I love Connolly and John Sanford, Sandra
Mm.
Brown, Tess Gerritsen, S.A. Cosby, some of the Southern Noir stuff. I enjoy. Yeah, I like inspirational books. I just read A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman, which I had not read
Mm.
before, based on A Man Called Otto. The movie was based on that book. It's phenomenal, fantastic. And so I think you learn so much by reading other people's work. And for me, a lot of times I'll learn by reading out of genre. I read Wally Lamb's book "She's Come Undone" earlier this year was
Mm.
recommended to me because I've got an inspirational book in my toolbox. I haven't written it yet, and I wanted to read some good ones, and it was phenomenal. And so I think the more you read, the better you get. And for me, it's also just pure fun. I read for fun, so um, it's pretty wild. I read all the Harry Potter books, both to
Mm.
learn and also because they were fun. So
What is next for you in your writing?
So I'm working on a book now called The Mediator, which will come out this time next year. That will introduce a new character. It's more back in my Southern universe. I'm a registered mediator, and so mediation's kind of taking over a lot in litigation now, where you try to settle the case before trial. And this mediator gets in an impossible situation where one of the parties is blackmailing her to settle the case on his terms. And so it's a fast story, plays out over about 5 days, and super excited because it'll be a new character, but there will be some Easter eggs for fans of mine with prior characters and stuff. So always fun.
Robert, what's the best thing about being an author?
I just love. I mean, it really is. Living in vision for me. It's what I've always wanted to do. And from the minute you pick up a book and you read it and you smell it and it smells good. I mean, for me, that's always been such a joy. And so when I get my box of books, it's just like George McFly at the end of Back to the Future when he opens the box up and he hands it to Marty. It brings back all of that for me. And so when I read reviews from fans, or when somebody tells me they love the story or cried at the end or whatever, it's such a jolt. And I love doing it, and I love it when people talk to me about how the book might have reached them. And so it really is. It's just a dream come true for me.
He's Robert Bailey. The book out now is The Boomerang. You can connect with him online, robertbaileybooks.com, Facebook at Robert Bailey Books, and Instagram at rbailey, Bailey 32. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Steve.
And this is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards.